Hi, good day. Hi, this is Greg Luss, City Manager of Lebanon, and welcome to Lebanon in Depth. Today, again, we're lucky and really pleased to have our police department here in Lebanon represented here at our show. And I have Rich Smolenski with us, an officer. I'm really happy you're here today, first of all. I love your gear. And we'll talk about the gear as we get into it, because it's kind of this fall we had a really great time, because every show we've had a police officer representing a different aspect of Lebanon Police Department. It's just really diverse and interesting department, great department. I'm proud of it. But Rich, before we get into that, could you? The public always likes to know about our leaders in our organizations and our people that take on these special tasks. Well, could you tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely.
Where you're from?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And I'm originally from the North Shore of Massachusetts. I moved up to New Hampshire when I was pretty young, to the Lakes region. And from there, I graduated high school and joined the Navy to see the world and get some college money. And I went through a couple different schools and some pretty interesting commands, and I had the opportunity to either go to a ship or go overseas. And the job overseas wasn't what I had been trained to do, but it sounded pretty interesting. It didn't have a particular name, it was just a number. They called it the 9545 program. And what it was a mix of law enforcement and force security for bases in foreign countries.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of stumbled into the career path that way. I did 3 years in Naples, Italy, and I had married my high school sweetheart at that point, and was fortunate enough that she came over. So we had a three-year honeymoon in Italy. And when my time was up in the service, I had all this money with the GI Bill and the Navy College Fund, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had kind of enjoyed the law enforcement aspect. And so I came out and I went to the Concord Technical Institute here in New Hampshire for an associate's degree in criminal justice.
Oh, good.
When that was done, it was just kind of a logical choice to apply for police departments. And one of the better instructors I had down there was a former chief from Lebanon.
Oh, great.
And so he had suggested Lebanon, and I applied and went through the process and got hired, and that was in 2003, and so I've been with Lebanon ever since.
Oh, that's great. Well, congratulations. Thanks for the service, of course, in the Navy. That is really interesting. Now with the police department, I know that you carry on the regular duties as an officer, but you have some specialized duties.
I do.
And that's what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So kind of tell me a little bit, you can tell me about the mix-up of having the regular duties as an officer, and then you're in some special unit.
Primarily, I work patrol in the patrol division. I'm a supervisor currently on the day shift, working 6 to 2, and that takes up the vast majority of my time. The specialty unit that I'm involved in is Lebanon's Tactical and Containment Team. And what it is a response, the department's response to a number of critical incidents that required a higher degree of training and a group, sort of a team effort in containing these critical incidents. It's not a SWAT team. We work very closely with New Hampshire State SWAT. Our primary function is that if a critical incident occurs, that we contain it and act appropriately and can sort of manage the incident until state SWAT's there to arrive and assist.
And when you mentioned critical incident, could you provide the members of the community with examples of what type of the general nature of these critical incidents is?
Absolutely. There was a handful of incidents that happened after I came on Lebanon that kind of led to this. In one situation, we had a person who was estranged from his girlfriend. They had a child together. She had court paperwork prohibiting him from being around her. And he ultimately found out where she was staying and took her captive back to his residence here in Lebanon. And we were able to contain it to that area, but we didn't have any specialized training at that point. And luckily, everything turned out safe for everybody. But it certainly brought the idea to our department, the management of the department, to think that maybe this is something that we should look at a little closer. And then there was another gentleman, very similar story. Most of these stories have some sort of mental health issue to it. And in this particular person's case, he had found out where his, I believe it was estranged wife at this point, was working in a town nearby and had made some calls and was threatening to go down and shoot her. And officers arrived and were able to get around the residence, but he was able to get access to a vehicle, get in that vehicle and leave town, and a large-scale pursuit took place, and he was stopped within a mile or so of where she worked. And that was another case where, looking at the tactical doctrine of containment, that there were some issues that we could address with training.
Okay. Now, maybe some different ways of starting at this is first of all, I guess, is okay. So obviously we had some incidences that seem to justify that. Maybe we should do some specialized type of approaches to deal with these situations, because they certainly have potential for being expansive and causing additional damage if not contained. So once that decision was made, then we had to create the unit. And I suppose it had to have specialized training, or how did people become knowledgeable about how to do this? I mean, it seems it kind of makes me shivers when I think about stuff like this. You know how it's so nerve-wracking. But you must have specialized training.
Yes, absolutely. At the time, the chief, deputy chief, on down to the captain level, got in touch with state police and their SWAT command, and some ideas were tossed around, figuring out what the best fit was for Lebanon. At that point in the state, there was a handful of regional teams that were able to take smaller communities and kind of pool their resources, and then you had some larger cities that had their own full-time or at least part-time but fully dedicated SWAT teams. And so we kind of created a hybrid model. In discussing it with state police, the amount of training that it takes to get up to a full SWAT qualification, and these are kind of decided on a national SWAT organizational kind of culmination of the greater minds of all the large SWAT departments. And they say that there's a certain amount of training that needs to be done and certain types of equipment, and a lot of that is cost prohibitive. So this model that we came up with was geared specifically towards containing the incident. In all these high incident situations, there's some very, very key aspects and steps. And first and foremost is to contain it, thereby at least minimizing the liability to the community, to officers, and to the suspects in these situations as well. And so we had decided that we had the ability to at least equip ourselves and train ourselves up to the point of working as containment, and also in the worst case scenario, if we had to make an entrance in a hostage situation, at least having the tools and the training, the ability to do that. And I should say also, a lot of the high risk warrants that we're starting to see with drug involvement aren't particularly situations where state SWAT would get involved, unless there are certain elements that met, but not all of the ones that we execute do. And so this is also another function that the team is able to. So working with New Hampshire's Tactical Officers Association, they decided that we could be trained up to a certain point, which is SWAT 1 and a lot of the breaching and canine SWAT classes. SWAT 2 is primarily hostage rescue, and that's where we fall short as far as manning and equipment. Worst case scenario, we can, but we work with state police more to that aspect.
And so once we had this, we gained this knowledge, we had this training. I'm interested in, so we usually always have our officers are always first at the scene. And so they're out there and they start seeing something. How do they know where's the threshold to ask for this assistance, this approach? How does that happen?
After we created the team, we started looking at policies and procedures from other SWAT departments in the state and nationwide. And we ultimately went with state police's model. They have a threat matrix, and it's a simple check sheet, and it's lined items. Does the suspect is the suspect known to carry firearms, and that would be one check. And so when it reaches a certain level, we contact the officer in charge. Would contact our SWAT commander, who is also a lieutenant in charge of our detective division, and would say, hey, this is what I got, and he would make the decision whether to activate the entire team or portions of it.
Okay.
And obviously, as more boxes gets checked off, the more likely it is that the team would be activated, all the way up to bringing in state SWAT.
State SWAT. So basically, we have some guideposts in the checkoff.
Absolutely.
And once we start looking at we're getting that, we're giving an advisement to an officer in charge of the SWAT, who then makes the call as to whether to bring in the squad and how much and when. Now, how often has the technical team been out? I mean, is it on a regular basis during a year? Do you go out a few times? If you're into warrants, it seemed like you'd be out more.
It's we've only had a handful of full team call-outs. There's been, I'd say every year there's probably a handful of incidents where members of the team are involved to some level or another. And it's kind of interesting because all the members of the team they're not fully dedicated to the tactical team. They work as detectives, they work as patrolmen. So there's been a handful of situations where it might not have risen to activating the entire team, but command from the team was involved and took officers that were already on duty and maybe called in one or two others and worked in kind of a partial call-out. So only been a handful of full call-outs, but we've worked in a number of different capacities throughout the year.
Do you have special types or types of equipment? Generally, what types of things do you have to be equipped with?
We carry ballistic vests that are more than the regular patrol bulletproof or bullet-resistant vests. They're much heavier. They're designed to take a higher hit. We also carry Kevlar helmets, much like the military does, that are also ballistic. We all carry specialized gloves in padding so that if we were moving in and out of a place, as well as this sort of uniform obviously isn't a patrol uniform. It's designed for camouflage. If we ended up having to contain an area but do so discreetly. So we're all equipped with that. We're all equipped with special rifles that take a fair amount of training and are fairly expensive but are designed for this task specifically.
So are there occasions one part of me says, well, there's occasions where they absolutely know you're there and that you already have a perimeter or something. And there's other occasions where they might not know you're there, you're just observing until it's appropriate?
Absolutely. In a sort of situation where we would get a call of a despondent person or something like that with a firearm, if we have the ability to set up a containment or a perimeter without them knowing we're there, it's less likely to force a reaction from them, especially if you're dealing with mental health sort of situations. So in situations where they don't expect you to be there or know that you're there, it's definitely beneficial to arrive in a discreet manner.
Yes. It sounds to me there's a lot of teamwork in this.
There is an awful lot.
I mean, it's since that in order to accomplish these tasks, which one hand are have to be a certain amount of action-oriented taking, but on the other hand, it has to be, very sensitive and sophisticated where you're going, but you have to be able to communicate with each other.
Yes.
Is there a team? I mean, in terms of the level of teamwork that's involved between you and your other team members? There
is. We do the vast majority of training. I'd say almost all of it is team-oriented. A lot of times, especially when you're talking about entering into a structure, a building, or anything like that with the full team. We have to move in such a manner that the entire team is fluid and kind of everybody knows what everybody is doing. And we've since incorporated a canine, and so that adds a whole nother aspect of communication and teamwork. And this is the difference between regular patrol. You're very often just the sole person dealing with a situation. And everybody's kind of their own boss depending on the situation, whereas this team is a little bit more military structured as far as command and communication, obviously the higher level of threat and just the way that things need to be communicated on a team effort.
That's great. Well, as we finish our segment of the show, I want to, I guess you'd enjoy this. I mean, I get the sense of this is a rewarding part of your career.
It is. There's higher standards for our fitness. There's higher standards for our weapons qualifications. But it all brings a sense of pride and accomplishment in our work.
Well, as far as the future of the team, do you see this continuing? Do you see it changing any way?
Absolutely. The serious critical calls that we deal with are increasing in frequency, and I think we can see this as a national trend as well as statewide. And most of the work that we do, most of the equipment that we get off drug seizures. It's not city funded or taxpayer funded. So as we get the equipment, it it takes time. It's a process, and we've recently just added K9 to our team, and so we're working on that. So I see in the future, expanding as well as we possibly can to cover the type of incidents that we have to deal with.
Well, I just on behalf of the city of Lebanon, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your team members and for jobs well done, and we appreciate knowing you're out there.
Thanks.
And, I guess again I want to end our segment by thanking the police department for participating in our show and showcasing our different aspects of what makes a quality city, what makes a quality police department. Thank you. Welcome back to our show today in our second segment. I'm going from the bravery of the attack team and the resilience they have, and the quick thinking they have, action, but it's still restraint and valuing others and those sort of things that we have. And we're going to the numbers. And the numbers today, I wanted to discuss with you the 2012 budget. It's approaching that time of year when you'll start seeing here in November budget information for the 2012 budget. You'll also start seeing some deliberation. And down here, and finally, you'll see some action adopting the 2012 budget by the City Council come December. So I think there's lots of value in the sharing information in the community, and Lebanon Depth is devoted to that, and CATV is devoted to this, as we lay these plans out before you. Cities, why do they exist? What's the point of having cities? I think the point of cities, is the vision of the community, first of all, and we have one in Lebanon of being a sustainable community. We're on a mission toward that direction of creating a sustainable community. My job as city manager is to work on unification, unity of effort, taking resources we have, which are getting scarcer, and making sure they're applied to achieve outcomes, because we are trying to redirect the city focus on outcomes, because we know how precious and how valuable your financial resources are as residents of Lebanon, and we need to be really great stewards for you. We need to do the right thing. We only need to use dollars for outcomes that you are willing for the city to provide, and at levels you feel are affordable. We started the process of the 2012 budget way back last spring. It seems so far ago when I first came. I'm in my 8th month now, and this has occupied a great deal of the time, working with all the teams we have. When we started the process, we were concerned. Of course, we're concerned about the economy. We're concerned about the rippling of the state's downshifting of costs to the city. We're concerned about the federal government in struggling with its own dilemmas of debt and dilemmas of really taxing people and yet wanting to meet fundamental responsibilities. And it all kind of slides downhill when you start having national and statewide, and even go farther than that, global issues. And when we end up, it ends up right in our community. It looked like our projections was like almost, it was in the 5% range, as high as to increases in the municipal rate back there in the spring if you were buying into trends. Our council here in Lebanon, the city councils, tried to say, let's live within our means in 2012 in much the same manner as at the level that we have in 2011. We worked with all the departments. They've done a lot of lifting and working on numbers, and with the goal in mind of trying to reach toward that. Nevertheless, when we finished our budget work, we had the departments do work for in the month of July into August, and then about the third week of August, each department submitted to the city manager's office, my office, and the finance department as close support and leadership with me, and we looked at their submittals. We still saw the number in the 5% level of rising in the municipal tax rate, and that's because there was a number of different costs increase that were basically handed down to the city. Of course, I'll re-mention it again because it's always good to mention it again. It was downshifting the state cost to the city. It also was the trends we had in terms of insurance costs. That's an increase. Nationally, it's been higher in some places, up to 25%. But here, we still, through some management efforts in our finance department, have brought it down to a level of 13% increase, but that's still an increase. There were contractual obligations the city had entered in it over the years, and that was some cost of living increases that were contractual. There was also rising costs of energy, and energy shows up in fuel. It shows in the cost of a lot of things. Materials, supplies, cost of materials and supplies continue to go higher. One of the biggest aspects and probably one of the central components of increases is the debt service. The debt service, if you had a 5% increase in the municipal tax rate, you're looking at 2.1% for debt service with past obligations entered into. These obligations are really investments made in the past toward the betterment of the city and the expansion of the infrastructure of the city. You see the CSO projects throughout the city. They've been going for some time. They're required under a consent order with the federal government. This is an important thing, the separation of the water and sewer and the redoing of the streets in the city of Lebanon. It'll be a 50 to 100 year investment as this is happening, but it still doesn't take away from the immediacy of the costs of it. You look at the situation and you have to figure out what you're going to do. So what we did is we went line by line, item by item through every budget, working with the departments. So this is multiple visitation on the different lines in our budgets. Once by the department, and then again by the city manager and the finance department, working with the departments. So you could say it was a very thorough vetting of every item we had. We looked at everything we'd done. The departments have really tried to keep their operational costs below what they had last year, at the most equal to what they had last year. And city really runs on people. Like most of our local government, as we have reduced and become leaner, the costs of the city's operation are really vested on the HR costs and the personnel costs. And that's important to keep in mind. So when you come to reducing a budget of a local city right now, you have to look at the personnel costs of the city, which is what we did. You also have to look at the revenue streams in the city. And New Hampshire is really, unlike many states, it's very, very much core and only funded by the property tax system. There's fees and other things that are out there, but there isn't like a wide spectrum of revenue streams. It really boils down to property tax. And then when you're a growth hub like Lebanon is, where there's trafficking in and out to do business, to have jobs, to make a living, to help support yourselves and the families, that when you come in and out of Lebanon, and if you may not live in Lebanon, the cost of all that service is coming home to roost on the property tax system. There's development occurring in Lebanon, and it's a vibrant place, and that's a wonderful thing. That's a challenge, but that's a better challenge to have than in some places where there is no development. There is no opportunity for growth. There is no opportunity for jobs or livable wages. Here in Lebanon, we have all these opportunities, but we also have a very tough property tax base because, of course, with the terrain, the steepness, the rivers, how things are located, what's buildable, what's not. It kind of confines in the opportunity of developing of the property. So it's tough to stay ahead of the curve in terms of the services being demanded and the resources available in a property tax system only. So this is a tough dilemma, and we're going to work on finding a model for it. For this round in 2012, we're also looking at 2013. We don't do these this year, 2012, in a vacuum and say we're just going to look at 2012. We were looking at 2013. Following 2013, we're going to look at 2014, 15, and 16. So we're looking at multiple years in our planning. In doing this, this time around, we're spreading the reductions in the footprint, especially we're shrinking the footprint of the city up. We're trying to do it strategically so that we maintain a workforce that can sustain services, yet reduce the municipal tax levy to a level that is acceptable and affordable to the community, and that is still able to deliver the services that you and the residents of this city would like to have. And you'll see this in November. And we work to get that under 2. We work to get it lower. And we'll be finally presenting to the City Council here in November. I'm going to present the budget. It's a little bit different format because I have a little different approach to things. We're going to be looking at what you're buying for the money you're allowing us to be stewards. And so we're going to be looking at what outcomes. You know, the core outcomes of the city is police, fire, public works. Some business lines the city has are recreation and library. We have human services. We fund human services nonprofits. We're basically looking at many aspects of our lives as we live, those who live here, like myself and my wife, and yourselves and your families. So we want to make sure the core is sustained, and we make sure that we look at maybe doing things differently wherever we can. And we're going to share some of the reductions throughout our different cost centers. These are difficult times, and I think the best part is to have lots of conversations. This show, Lebanon in Depth, is meant to be a regular conversation twice a month. I think we're gonna keep on developing it. I invite you to start participating in the conversation if you haven't already. Follow my website at webcity.com and go to the manager part of it. Go to city manager, and you'll see on the website there's a blog, there's a Twitter. You'll see video of these shows on that site. You'll also see archival of these shows. Please send me and email me any topics you'd like to talk about in these conversations. It's who's going to receive what, who's going to pay, how much, what's appropriate. And we look at all our sectors, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and the public sector. As I tell developers, there's no free lunch. For everything we do, every development we have, everything we want to preserve, we have to make sure we know there's a price to be paid. And the price is going to be either a shared one with the multiple sectors, or it's going to end up with property taxes. So you have to remember when you think about these things that we're going to be considering in the near future, you have to put your property taxpayer hat on. You have to also recognize we want development, but we need to make sure development helps pay its fair share. We want to make sure we share the services and where it can be better provided by another sector, a nonprofit, private, then it should be provided rather than public. We'll just have to see how this gels out, and that's why we're going to be having the conversations. On our next shows to come up, we're going to be talking about the master plan. We are going to set an occasion to have a conversation on Lebanon for the future, up through 2030, and we'll be going through the formal process of the Planning Commission as they deliberate on the master plan. So there's a lot lying ahead of us, and if we work together, I'm confident we can overcome the challenges, take advantage of the strengths of Lebanon, and make Lebanon the great place it is, and make it even greater. And the best times are ahead of us, and I think that's why we have to unite, and we have to do this together. I hope you have having a good fall. and take care.